Welcome to Do You Approve This Groove, a project where two old friends dive headfirst into the 500 greatest albums of all time and beyond. We're going to relive them like we're trading the ultimate mixtape, one legendary record at a time. Each episode, we take a deep dive into iconic albums, rediscover their magic, and see if they hold up after all of these years. We'll rank each album and open up our hot takes for discussion. So whether you're hearing it for the first time or for the 100th, whether you agree or disagree, we're turning the volume up and bringing you along for the ride. In this episode, we count down albums 440 through 431 on the Rolling Stone Greatest Albums of All Time. Tyler is left whelmed, if not entirely underwhelmed, with all but one entry, while Kyle, on the other hand, came away with a few winners. But we both agreed that once again, double albums are presumptuous and unnecessary when they're left in unskilled hands. I'm Tyler, and this is Kyle. Let's get to it.
All right, Tyler, here we are back again. Another chunk of 10 albums this time. We were just saying before we started recording that this is a kind of a challenging group of albums here, and we haven't quite really wrapped our heads around all of them. How you feeling coming into this week with these?
I feel disjointed, yes. In my personal life, I've been busy the last 10 days since we recorded the last one, too. But the albums didn't help. There wasn't a lot for me to gravitate to in this group. I wouldn't say there was a lot for me to discover. And they, in general, like, taken holistically across the 10, are fine. You know, so I don't have a whole lot coming into this discussion. No hot takes really. Maybe one or two, but it's just kind of like, okay, we listened to these 10 albums.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It just seemed like.
How about you?
I was just kind of. There were one or two that I actually really ended up kind of liking. But overall, I was just kind of middle of the road with a lot of them this week. There was a lot of them that I was happy to have listened to. I'm glad to have been exposed to, but I probably won't go back. We're really setting up a high tone with this. People are gonna like turn this right off. You're like,
these are 10 mediocre albums. No. I would say though that there was one on this list that I came in like fairly familiar with, not excited to listen to, and I left it thinking much more favorably of it than I did when I started. And there was another one that when I have always avoided, and when I started listening to it, I hated it. And after listening to it a few more times, it's grown on me.
I'll be interested to know which one that is.
Yeah. The others, they were fine.
There's a lot of historical significance in this group, though. I kind of feel like there was some albums that were really important, I think I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Probably not as important as Britney Spears' Blackout at 441, but hey. No. You want to get this thing going?
Yeah, let's dive right in.
Let's do it. The first album we're going to talk about this week is number 440 on the Rolling Stone Greatest Albums of All Time. It is Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter. This album was released on January 4th, 1971. It is her 16th album in her discography, which is prodigious. She has very many records. She did it for a long time. This is a country album on the Decca label produced by Owen Bradley. It is also of note the inspiration behind the 1980 Oscar-winning movie, also titled The Coal Miner's Daughter, which is based on Loretta Lynn's life. Which is interesting when I think back at this record, because Loretta Lynn in general, and in this album in particular, is an autobiographical songwriter. Kyle, what did you think about this autobiographical album from Loretta Lynn?
Well, I hadn't thought about that in terms of autobiographical, but I think that perfectly fits what she was doing here. I mean, every single song told a story, right? Which At first I really kind of appreciated it, and as I was listening to it, I was thinking about like modern country and trying to pinpoint that, like, this, listening to this album and listening to the autobiographical nature of her lyrics and her songwriting, like, this felt, I wouldn't say relatable. Like, a lot of it was about being, you know, the wife of somebody, you know, or the coal miner's daughter, as the title of the album is, or, you know, having a cheating husband or something like that. Like, not really things that I could necessarily relate to, but I felt connected to the lyrics. They felt believable and authentic and real, as opposed to more modern country. Like, I kept going back to the Miranda Lambert album as I was listening to this, and how I didn't feel a whole lot of connection with that album and what those differences might have been. And I don't know that I necessarily landed on anything in particular, other than this just felt a lot more authentic and real and engaging to listen to. Like, she's a fantastic singer. She really tells a good story. I think what got me is kind of a lack of musical variety through it. It kind of got a little samey as I was getting towards the end. Those emotional connections maybe started to feel a little bit more surface level and not quite so deep. But I mean, overall, it was an enjoyable album to listen to. And I think the thing that I'm going to come back to repeatedly this week with these 10 albums is that I'm glad to have listened to this album. I don't know that I'll go out of my way to put it on again, but I'm glad to have listened to it, and I got something out of it. I don't know exactly what that is, but I got something out of it, and I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of different takes on that one. I mean, Coal Miner's Daughter is a great song, the title track. One interesting thing about these songs is, even though they seem to tell an autobiographical story, or at least a very relatable story from her perspective, the front half of this album was written by some heavy hitters of country music. I don't know if you caught that.
No.
Loretta Lynn wrote Coal Miner's Daughter. Conway Twitty, one of my Graham's favorites, wrote the second track. Glenn Campbell, Chris Christopherson. Then you get to Marty Robbins on the back half, and some other names that I'm sure other people would recognize, but I don't. So actually, of the 11 songs, Loretta Lynn helped write 1, 2, 3 of them. So I'm sure she lent her ear and, you know, artist's eye to and ear to most of them and made them her own. But this is more so than seems like at first listen, much more of a Nashville record, where it seems like, you know, a lot of songwriters contributed and these songs were picked up. I also really enjoyed the song Another Man Loved Me Last Night. It's for the time, especially, that atypical story of infidelity on the woman's part, which was not something that really got around a whole lot back then, especially in country music, and is much more common now, I guess. But yeah, that one was kind of interesting. What'd you score this one?
I went with a 3. Again, I think that's kind of my standard score when I listen to an album. It doesn't really blow me away, but I'm glad to have listened to it. Like I said, yeah, I went with a 3 on this one. What about you?
I'd give it the same, for the exact same reasons. Glad I listened to it. Nothing really stood out to me where I would revisit again, but I did enjoy it. This album, interestingly, peaked at number 1 on the U.S. country charts when it came out. That's not surprising. It topped the I don't know what chart that is. I guess the single topped the charts for singles at the time. It went as high as number 4 on the U.S. Hot Country Billboard charts, and it crossed over to number 81 on the Billboard 100 or 200. So it did make a dent in mainstream more than just country. Yeah. Loretta Lynn. I mean, when you have a musical movie made about you that wins an Oscar for something, I mean, it can't be nothing. So
yeah,
good on you. Loretta Lynn, actually, she had a tough couple of her last years. I mean, she earned it. She was pretty old, but she had a stroke in 2017, I think it said, and then she broke her hip a couple years after, and then she passed away, I think, in 2022. So she kicked it for a long time, that Loretta Lynn.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No. I mean, I kind of want to watch. I want to watch that movie now. I've never seen it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to check out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, that was Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter at 440. The next album on the list at 439 is James Brown's Sex Machine. This album was released in September of 1970. It was recorded in a couple different sessions, which is something we'll chat about in a minute, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
This is a double LP that comes in at over an hour long. It's produced by James Brown, which if you've seen or heard about James Brown, he actually would produce his band live on stage, which was kind of interesting. I don't know if you ever heard interviews with his band, people that played in his band.
No.
I mean, he was like a perfectionist. I mean, down to where like he would tell the drummer like, chill on the hi-hat, like, you know, make that part quieter, or you know,
during live performances.
Give me another kick in there. And the drummer especially was under a lot of pressure because it's funk and soul, right? So the drummer carried a lot, but he was pretty demanding, and he'd burn through session musicians in a hurry, and to where people weren't all that psyched to work with him if they weren't in the groove, so to speak. But once he found people that he liked and could be in the band, then that's what it was. So, and especially in this recording, this is. Well, I don't know. Do you know the lore about the recording of this and what it purported to be and not?
Yeah.
Then why don't you get into that?
Yeah. So I think it was really interesting because I always feel like, I mean, there are a lot of bands that are better live than they are in the studio, and I think that's a legitimate thing that, you know, that really happens and can really harm an artist's career if they can't put together something strong in the studio. And I don't know that that's the case with this album or with James Brown and his band and all that. And I get wanting to recapture the live experience of seeing and hearing and listening to this band, but it's really weird to me that this is a studio album. At least parts of it are a studio album that they faked the live aspects of it. You know, they faked the crowd noise, they faked the reverb, they faked all of the things to make it sound like they were performing this album live. Which I mean, kudos to them because I didn't catch that as I was listening to it. Really,
right? It was done pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, especially for 1970 or whatever it was. I mean, like they made it sound pretty good. And if you listen to the one album that I was thinking about, once I saw that, because I went on their Wikipedia and was reading the description of this album, and then saw what that was, and I started thinking about the live Blink-182 album, the Mark, Tom, and Travis show or whatever it is. That I think that all that was really recorded live, but when a band records a live album, they do end up going a lot of times going back into the studio and kind of overdubbing some parts, fixing some mistakes, playing with the sound of the audience, the volume of the audience, and that sort of thing, to the point where it does kind of feel a little fake. And I always felt that way with that live Blink-182 album. If you played those two albums, you know, this James Brown album and that Blink album side by side for me, I don't know that I would be able to pick out that this James Brown album wasn't actually recorded live. At least if I didn't know it going in. But yeah, that was super interesting. And I don't know why, I don't know why they did it, I guess, is the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. It does say that I think it said all but one of the songs on the second disc were live.
Yeah, so it wasn't all
live.
Yeah, it wasn't all done that way in the studio, but
right. And when you look at the album, I don't know what it looks like on Spotify, but on Apple Music, if it was recorded live, it says live at and then gives a venue and a date. The others don't. Another interesting thing is that I mean, the title of the first track is "Get Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine," which most people just know a Sex Machine.
Mm-hmm.
If you know James Brown, like that's the song probably people think of. That is a 10, almost 11-minute track of a 64.5-minute album. And listening to that, it reminded me of some of the other stuff we've listened to where it was like, man, this doesn't need to be 11 minutes. Like, we got it.
Yep.
I mean, and it would be one thing if like the band was really showing out and there were solos that highlighted the musicians, and there just wasn't.
No.
So I'm presuming that that's James Brown working the crowd and doing his dance and like just getting in the groove of this stuff and, you know, kind of letting people know what's going to happen. But I mean, that's 10% of the album right there in the first track, and it is a banger. But a couple other ones that get some love are "Low Down Popcorn," which is just a funny title. I like that one. Yeah, and yeah, but this, I don't know. This again, this was one that I just kind of enjoyed. It was fine. I might, just because it is different and it has some energy, I might pick this one out or a couple of these songs out on a mix at a party or something like that, just to get people going. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like
yeah.
I was legitimately like chair dancing at one point listening to this. Like, I got
Sure.
into it. I got into it. I enjoyed it. I think I'll say it with this one, and I think I'm going to say it a couple more times throughout this episode. It just went on a little too long. Individual songs went on a little too long, and the album as a whole, I think, went on a little bit too long. In the end, I kind of the same as what you were saying. I'm glad to have listened to it. I probably should give it a little bit more than I gave Loretta Lynn, because the same thing. I think I probably would come back and listen to this again if I was in the right mood. If I really felt like this was what I needed in the moment, I wouldn't be afraid to come back to this one. But I still ended up going with a 3. I mean, it was good. I'm glad to have listened to it. Yeah.
Same. Yep, I give it a 3. Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot. I don't have access to a lot of data on its sales, but I mean, James Brown did really well. So, shout out James Brown, and the boys. Just to wrap this up in the similar way that we have, he's credited as a writer on all but 2 of these songs. So he was a front man that like did the music. You know, I mean, sometimes you get like men or artists that they're the vocalists and that's it. You know,
Yeah.
they get a lot of the credit, but he ran the band, and he was in control of all that. So shout out to James. Sweet, that was James Brown's Sex Machine at 439. The 438th greatest album of all time, according to Rolling Stone magazine, is Park Life from Blur. Park Life was released on April 25th of 1994 through Food Records. It's the 3rd album from the English rock band Blur. It's interesting that it's labeled on Wikipedia as a Britpop album. You know, I'm not that familiar with Britpop. But I will tell you maybe I can kind of start this one off a little bit. I was listening to this one as I was going to grab lunch from work. And it was like the first sunny day in a while. And it was, you know, starting to get in that spring weather. And I was, you know, I had like a 15-minute drive to go grab lunch and then bring it back. Grabbing pizzas for a couple of people trying a new pizza place in Rochester. It was phenomenal, by the way. Anyways, it started off with Girls and Boys, and I immediately went like, blah. Because Girls and Boys is, what did we had David Bowie last week. What's the other one that reminded us of like? Oh, and then that 9 Inch Nails that reminded us of like Depeche Mode and that like 80s kind of synthy stuff. And Girls and Boys, and all I can think of is that like they leaned into that on that one, because the rest of the album did not have that sound. And I was really pleased that they came out of that relatively quickly. Girls and Boys is a very Britpop song. Which is also interesting because this album is coming out right around the time of Oasis, as Oasis is like slamming Britpop. and just tearing it down in this much the same way that like the grunge genre did to hair metal and that 80s pop rock in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can kind of see where if Oasis is sort of the what is it, the anathema of Britpop, right? Really just shitting on it and tearing it apart. I would say Blur were like 1 foot in Oasis's world and 1 foot in Britpop's world. That's kind of my takeaway listening to this. What do you think?
Yeah, I kept going back to Oasis a lot with this too because I mean, when I think of Blur, I think of Song 2. That is before this
Mm-hmm.
album, that is the only Blur song that I could have told you about.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always known and understood, the 90s British invasion basically came down to Oasis and Blur. And I would say I'm strongly on Team Oasis. Like I really kind of enjoyed Oasis. So I honestly I was looking forward to listening to this album for that reason. To see like, oh, maybe I missed something with Blur and I'll give it a listen. I don't feel like I missed a whole lot. Like it was fine. It was a bit scattered, I think is what I kind of came away with. Like that first song, Boys and Girls, I didn't really get into that. Like it just felt like an ironic slap in the face the whole time. Like the music started and I was like, all right, okay. And then he started singing and it was almost like he was singing like, oh, you expected me to be able to sing well? And like he just and he was like, yeah, and like he was like laughing at us for expecting him to sing well. I don't know. I didn't really like it. There were songs on here that I did like, and I did in some turn appreciate how kind of varied it was. You know, Bank Holiday is a straight up punk song. And it was kind of cool. I kind of liked it. And that went right into Bad Head, which was more of a pretty song. Debt, I think it was Debt Collector, sounded I was picturing like an organ grinder on the street busking with his little monkey holding out the hat for money, like that sort of sound. there was a lot of different sounds on this album, and it was fine, but to me it never like coalesced around a specific identity, like a thing that I would say this is Blur. So it kind of missed for me there. I don't know. Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, I think this album, and maybe this is one of the challenges with. Well, before I get to that, I enjoyed the song "Park Life." It's the fourth track, and I may reference that later in one of our segments we do again. There's a specific reason I like that one, but I think this album was, and two other ones on this list were done a disservice this week. We have Blur, and then we have the Pet Shop Boys, which were like an early version of Blur, different, but like still within that Britpop genre. Then we have Gorillaz, which is fronted by Damon Albarn, who also was the lead singer for Blur. So like we had, it's not that they were all similar, but given the scope of these albums, like they were fairly packed together.
I'm looking at something here because even LCD Sound System, they're not British, but they had that song North American Scum because I think there was a lot of talk about them sounding like a Britpop kind of band, a later 2000s version of some of that, especially Pet Shop Boys sound. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that sound in this chunk of 10.
Yeah, I mean, like we've said with the other albums, I was glad to check this one out. I really like the album cover. I think that's the most redeeming quality to me of the whole thing. Since this is an audio medium, the album cover includes, well, two fully facing dogs at a dog racing track. And I don't know exactly what Park Life the track is referencing, but I love it when an album is just like that. It's just like a photo that like captures a mood, I guess. And one of the dogs has a muzzle on it and is freaking out as it's running. The other's just running, and it's just, I don't know. It's just a cool like aesthetic, I guess. So I like that. This is that album cover would get me to check out this album. Anyways, yeah. What'd you score this one?
2.5. This one I felt like went on a bit long again as well. Like it just it kept going. I think if it had if they had been able to cut it down to like 35 or 40 minutes, I probably would have liked it a bit more. But yeah, another one. Glad to have listened to it. Nothing wrong with it. Don't hate it, but not my thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It went 4 times platinum in the UK, so it clearly caught fire there. It peaked at number 1 in the UK, number 3 in Ireland, 4 in Iceland, 8th in European albums. It does not. There's no reference to where it charted in the US. But growing up in the 90s, I didn't know what Blur was until song 12?
Song 2.
Song 2, thank you. Yeah, song 12 was farther in their discography. Yeah, I didn't know about them until then. So, you know, and that doesn't mean that people don't know them over here. It's just, I mean, they weren't Hanson, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I would give this one like a 2.52. Nothing crazy, but kind of interesting. I might pull from this later again to just fill out a vibe, that sort of thing, but nothing. I mean, Girls and Boys is redeeming in that it is strange and awkward and a little bit dissonant, not in actual notes, but like it just makes you feel a little bit uneasy, jolted around, like that sort of thing. So I could see that one, but yeah. All right, that was Blur's Parklife at 438. The album Demon Days by Gorillaz is the 437th greatest album of all time. This album was released on May 11th of 2005 from Parlophone and Virgin Records. It has a lot of producers, some names you might know, the Gorillaz, the members of the band. We can talk about the band, this virtual band idea in a second. It features a number of artists. Sorry, Danger Mouse is another producer that you might know. It features a number of people, including MF Doom, Nick Turner, and, well, Dennis Hopper, and Booty Brown. Do you know who Booty Brown is?
No, I don't.
He's a member of the Far Side, an album that we listened to in maybe our first episode.
Yeah, that was a while ago now.
Yeah. So this is Demon Days. This comes in at 51 minutes and 42 seconds. This is a virtual band. We just got done talking about Damon Albarn, who went on to create this sort of side project, which has a different genre altogether. It's labeled as alternative rock, hip hop, trip hop, pop, and art rock. But the idea of this virtual band is that it untethered them from their own images. They could embody some characters and write from a different perspective, and experiment with different music than they might have been tied to were they themselves the faces of this band, which is an interesting phenomenon I come across every once in a while with musicians where, you know, like typecasting. Like, oh, this is what you do, and this is so different, nobody cares. Well, if I can remove myself from it, to where it's not like a pen name, right?
Yeah.
That's not the first thing you think of. Maybe people will give it a different shot. So what'd you think of this one?
Yeah, almost like wearing a mask so they don't know that it's you. But I came into this album with high expectations. I like Feel Good Inc. You know, like that was kind of the main single from this album. I really liked that song. And I was hoping for more like it. It's really different from that song. I felt like there was a lot on this album that was just very different from that song. It was a slow start for me. I don't think I really got into it until like that Dirty Harry song I ended up kind of liking, which is like the 5th or 6th song. It's pretty deep in there. I can see the Damon Albarn connection, obviously, between this and Blur, and what I had said about the Blur album, how it felt like it was kind of all over the place in terms of genre and style and focus. This was a little bit more directed, but you could still see how he was pulling from so many different genres to get to this sound. And I think I ended up liking a lot of the more hip hop focused songs more than any of like the alt rock songs and songs that sounded a little bit maybe more like Blur. I liked the songs that kind of had the more hip hop vibe to them. Other than that, I mean, it was fine. It was just, yeah. I mean, another one. I felt like it went on a little too long for me. I was a little disappointed that it wasn't all like Feel Good Inc., but it was good. It was fine. I had higher expectations for it than they were able to meet for me.
It's interesting. It's interesting because I had lower expectations for this one. Feel Good Inc. is the song that everybody knows. And coming into that one, I didn't want more of that. I did not want more of Feel Good Inc.
Okay.
But I wasn't familiar with it, so I thought it was going to be much more Feel Good Inc. And then when I really listened to it a couple times, I was really psyched that it wasn't all Feel Good Inc. So similar to last time when we talked about the White Stripes album, where I was familiar with a couple of the songs, and then listening to it more really grew my respect for the band and makes me want to check more of it out. I had a similar take on this one where I walked away thinking like I feel like I like this album.
So it sounds like you wanna FMK this one.
Sure. While I'm collecting my thoughts, do you want to explain this premise one more time?
Yeah. So we started this last week. The FMK game where you're given 3 options and you have to choose one that you would take to bed for the night, one that you would marry, that you would take home to mom and spend your life with, and one that you would have to just never see again. You'd have to kill it. We're doing that, each week. We're calling each other out when we get a vibe of, this is one that it might be a little bit challenging to think about. What's one song on this album that you would want to F? What's one song that you would want to M? And what's one song that you would want to K? So I'm calling Tyler out on this song. What's your FMK? What 3 songs would you
All right.
would you use for that?
So the hardest so there's a couple counterintuitive things now that I've collected my thoughts. I just referenced this. I wouldn't kill it, but I think the most popular one for folks to choose to either F or K or M would be Feel Good Inc. I actually left it off this list. I'm not including that one in there. Because again, it's a fine song, it's just not what I'm looking for. All right. So that means that the challenging part for me, I'd F with a lot of these songs. I would F with Kids with Guns. I'd F with Air. And I would F with the general vibe of... Which one was it? Every Planet We Reach is Dead. But ultimately, the one that I would throw all my eggs into the basket and buy drinks and try to take home at night would be White Light. That's the one that I would do a lot for. Yeah. Yeah, I'd take a shinner with a skateboard just to give it a bath, I think. Yeah. So that's the one that I really was drawn to. Now, the one that I would marry, right, the one that I'd take home to mom, that I'd hang my hat on and really stick with for a long time, I think is Dirty Harry. That song is really good. I love the beat. I love the music. It's just a fun one that puts you in a vibe that Feel Good Inc. puts you in a vibe, but it's Dirty Harry puts you in a different vibe, a little bit edgier, a little bit higher energy. And I like that one. And then I guess the one that I would kill would be the title track Demon Days, which is the last one. It seems out of place, and maybe that's the whole point as an album closer and a title track. Some artists use that to almost kind of preview where their sound is headed. It doesn't quite fit in there, but I would kill that one. But ultimately, there's a lot of songs to like on here, and this is one that I would come back to quite a bit. Yeah. What song or what did you score this one?
I went with the 3 again here. I think the same. I would come back to this given the right mood, kind of in the same way as I was saying with James Brown. It's not necessarily going to be something that is at the top of my mind, but if I were to randomly come across it or think about it, like, oh yeah, I might throw that on here and there. It wasn't bad. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It just didn't quite hit me. It's also one that I wonder if I came into it in a different mood, maybe it would have hit better. But I don't know.
So I texted you about that this weekend. I listened to it and kind of got into it, and then I was in New York City this weekend, and on Friday I was like bombing around Southern Manhattan by myself. Like, it was a nice day, and I was walking, and this just felt right. Like, it felt like the right thing to listen to as I'm on the train getting into the city, as I'm bombing around, like exploring and going to different places. So I'm gonna have a good memory of this album with this past weekend, which I liked. I gave this one a 4. I would seek this one out again for sure. This one did really well around the world, largely on the power of Feel Good Inc. That song transcended a lot of places. It got as high on the chart as 7th on the alternative albums in the U.S. It sold a bunch of vinyls. It had a number of number 1 spots on the charts internationally, and it charted in a whole bunch of, a whole ton of countries. I mean, Hungary, just Singapore, Scotland. I'm just picking out the words that we don't see very much. Taiwan, Japan, Greece, those sorts of things. So, I mean, it did really, really well. And it's a cool transition for the artist. We've talked about this in a couple other albums. Damon Albarn et al., Hewlett, his songwriting partner, are listed as songwriters on every single album. This is entirely self-done, in-house. They did it. Dirty Harry features Booty Brown from the Far Side, so no wonder that we both gravitated to that one. Yeah. So that was, I think we did it, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That was Demon Days from the Gorillaz at 4:37. The next album on our list is Tupac's All Eyes on Me. This album was released on February 13th, 1996. It is a double LP in at 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 20 seconds. This is the 4th studio album by Tupac and the final to be released during his lifetime. It was released 7 months before his death. Interestingly, I just read this, he was in jail for sexual abuse charges, and Suge Knight, the infamous Suge Knight, and Jimmy Iovine posted bail to get him out, and part of the stipulation was that he cut 3 albums with Death Row and Interscope as part of the deal. Right, so they fronted the bail money, which was not unsubstantial. It was $1.4 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So apparently it was an investment from those guys. The double album counted as the first 2 of the 3 album agreement. He died 7 months later. So, Kyle, are you a fan of Tupac?
This is one where, we've talked about before, at least my own personal lack of exposure or context for a lot of hip hop. And, obviously Tupac is somebody that I certainly know and know the name of. And, I could point out a few songs that I know of his, but this is the first time I've sat down and actually listened to an album of his. I didn't realize coming in that this was a double disc. And talk about autobiographical. You know, we said that with Loretta Lynn. I mean, that's what this was. I mean, this was an autobiographical album start to finish. I think what really got me though with this album is just the production of the music, the beats, and the just the music under him. I really enjoyed. Like, this made me want to learn more about how they made this album. Just because there's a lot, and especially at that time, like, I can imagine this being something that today in 2025 somebody could do, you know, in their basement, in their bedroom, with all the software that we have now. But in the 90s, it wasn't quite so easily done.
Right.
And there was a good mix of live instrumentation in there too. There's a lot of fun bass lines to listen to. There's a lot of fun drums in there to listen to, along with some of the more programmed stuff that I found really interesting to listen to. I think thematically, lyrically, like I said, very autobiographical, but there were definitely some filler songs. Like, this was a lot. I mean, 27 tracks. And I always, with a double album, I have kind of my standard double album that I measure everything against. You know, some people like, it's the Beatles' White Album. For me, it's Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, the Smashing Pumpkins album, because that to me is 28 songs, I think was that one, of no filler, you know, cohesive album start to finish. And when I compare this to that, this wasn't quite that strong to me as a double album. I think if you're going to go for it with a double album, you really have to have something tight and consistent all the way through. Otherwise, it ends up being a fair amount of filler, which to me, there was a fair amount of, there were some absolutely classic, great, amazing songs that I really enjoyed, but there was a lot of filler in this, I felt.
And I think one of the things that contributes to that is how many features there are, right?
Yeah.
One, in that you can fill out an album, a double album, when you have probably an average of between 2 and 3 features on almost every single song, which, you know, adds volume to it. But it will add to the disjointedness because, you know, different artists are coming in with different things to say, and, you know, so to have a cohesive piece when you've got, I mean, Snoop Dogg, I think, was probably the most featured person on here, but I mean, there's got to be at least 20 different artists that contribute to this. I mean, like, contribute verses to this.
Yeah, I mean, because there are individual songs that have 3 or 4 features.
So the counter example to that I can think of, and I'm sure there are many, is J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hills Drive, which I don't know if you've heard that one before. You've probably heard a song or two on there, but come across them. But he very notably on that album did not use any features. I mean, that is only him. There's one kind of vocal that I remember in a hook, but it's not. There's no featured verses. That it's him. So, you know, it's not that I lose respect for it. I mean, dude, if you're trying to crank out 2 albums to fulfill the obligation you owe to the guys that posted you bail, like, by all means, bring in your friends.
I was just gonna say, now knowing that story behind this album almost takes away a little bit more for me, because to me this was just like, well, I'm gonna do it. I've got enough material to put out a double album. I don't really know which songs I want to cut, so I'm just gonna put them all out there as a double album. That was kind of my initial takeaway, or my initial thought about it. But now knowing that, you know, maybe he was just doing it to fill a contractual obligation quicker, it's almost like, yeah.
It reminds me of that Marvin Gaye record, "The Hear My Dear," that we did in the first episode, where he had to fulfill it as a way to finalize his divorce.
Mm-hmm.
But and I don't know what Tupac thought of this, but remember, Marvin Gaye actually fell in love with the process and really came to own that record more than he set out thinking he would.
He started doing it out of spite, but
yeah, exactly. I don't. I mean, California Love is the one that people are going to know. There's 4 singles on this album. California Love, 2 of America. Now, I will say this. This is also one of my gripes. Do we have to... I'm going to be the old man yelling at clouds. Do we have to misspell everything and add a Z where there should be an S to everything? Like, come on.
That was cool in the 90s, though.
It was so cools. California Love, 2 of America's Most Wanted, How Do You Want It, and I Ain't Mad at Ya. This album won the 1997 Soul Train Music Award for Rap Album of the Year after he passed away. It was also nominated for Best Rap Album at the 39th Grammy Awards in 1997. He also won awards for this posthumously in a number of other categories and in other places. It's listed on a few greatest hip-hop albums of all time lists and is also notably on this one. Kyle, what did you end up scoring this one?
This was yet another 3 for me. I this is one that I'm actually really kind of disappointed at how long it was, because I feel like this could have been a solid like 4 to 5 if it was a single album of the, you know, the best songs from this. If they had just cut it down to like 10 or 12 and made it a single album, I could have gone with a 4 or 5, because there were songs that I really liked on here. But as it is, another 3.
I'd give this one a 2. I don't feel like I need to hear it again. I heard California Love at enough 4-H dances where I don't need to hear it again. So yeah, that's it for me. Anything else?
Nope, all good here.
All right, Tupac. Rest in peace. That was Tupac's album. What's this one called again? All Eyes on Me.
With a Z.
This is Tupac's. That was Tupac's All Eyes on Me, in at 4:36. And with that, Kyle, we're halfway through tonight's episode. That brings us to our returning segment. What else did you listen to this week? I mentioned earlier that I went down to New York. I knew I was headed down 17, 16, 15, on the 14th for sure. I had planned on leaving work, taking Friday off and leaving work and going down that morning. But then I saw an Instagram post by one of my favorite bands of all time, one of my top records of all time, probably one of the first 5 albums I ever owned on vinyl, RX Bandits. They played the first of all, they don't tour very often. They played the first stop of their tour in historic Asbury Park in New Jersey, which was right down near where I was staying anyways. So I left work on Thursday and drove down and went to that show. And they celebrated the 20th anniversary of their album Resignation on Drive-Thru Records. And I loved it. It was fun to see those. I hadn't seen them since maybe 2009, so it was cool to hear that. They played it front to back, and played a couple other great songs at the end, off some other records. It was cool. I enjoyed it. They sounded... The sound of the album was weird, just the way it was mixed in the space. And I don't know if you've noticed this. Do you remember taking videos back on flip phones and thinking that, oh, cool, I'll send this to somebody, and how awful it sounded? Like, it just sounded like rattling around in a garbage can.
Yep.
Man, like, we were talking about live recordings. You can record with an iPhone now in a loud concert venue, and man, it sounds like it's mixed really well, to the point where I could hear the horns coming through, I could hear the guitars coming through that I could not hear live. It sounded really good. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Here.
I will also add, Kyle,
Mm-hmm.
before you do that while I didn't, it's not necessarily music, I got into the show Shoresy this week.
Oh.
I don't know if you've heard of this one.
Oh yeah. Did you watch Letterkenny before that?
I didn't watch Letterkenny.
Yeah.
So Letterkenny, I'm going back and watching now, and I'm only a couple episodes in, and it's harder for me now because I just view him as Shorzy. So I'm waiting for Letterkenny to kind of catch its stride, because it took Shorzy a couple episodes also to catch its stride.
Yep.
But man, I loved Shorzy. Shorzy was like, to me, it was like Ted Lasso and like Napoleon Dynamite mixed together.
Yeah.
Like just goofy, but man, the one-liners on there. I wondered if you had caught that earlier. I said that I would take a shitter with a skateboard just to whatever I said about one of those songs on the Gorillaz album.
That's
So
the
there's a bunch
Shorzy
of
line.
speech patterns that I'm already picking up.
Yeah.
I've started saying "holy" more often.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about it is like the Canadian references, which I know just enough about to get. Like when they had the character from Newfoundland come in on Shorzy and they were ragging on him because they couldn't understand what he said. I love the dude that Dolo that just speaks French. My favorite part that I think they didn't bring back for season 3 and 4 were the two announcers from Quebec. I don't know if you caught that enough, but like they speak in French with subtitles, and it's just goofy, right? And but the way that they talk and how I think one of their names was Remy Nadeau, and they would like every single time he would like say the other guy would say his name, and then he would say his own name. So it was almost like Remy Nadeau,
Yeah.
like, and it was so stupid and funny. That's why I think it reminds me a lot of like Napoleon Dynamite, but man, it's so good. So many one-liners. The way that they repeat everything is so great. The one dude that's just like, everything is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, dude, the chicken fingers are unbelievable. Tubing's unbelievable. And spectacular. Yeah, like, I love everything about that show. Anyways. Kyle, what have you been listening to?
All right, so it took me a second to dig it out, but I just got new speakers in my like home office here that I'm really excited about, and so I finally like brought my turntable in here, and I have been actually listening to my vinyl again. And this week I grabbed it. I've been listening to this is a Puscifer album. It's a live album. It is called Global Probing. I went and saw them on this tour in Philadelphia. This was a couple years ago now, but Puscifer is such an exciting, weird, eccentric, but amazingly good band. A lot of fun to listen to, and an incredible live show. I mean, it's a side project of Maynard James Keenan from Tool. He's got Tool and A Perfect Circle and Puscifer. And if I had to choose one of the three, I think I would choose Puscifer. And this live version of this album, their most recent studio album, Existential Reckoning, was like 2019, 2020, and this is a lot of this live album is based on Existential Reckoning, which is just a phenomenal album itself. But yeah, that's what I was listening to this week, getting that turntable out, kind of enjoying that again.
All right, back to our list. The 435th greatest album of all time is actually by the Pet Shop Boys. This is the second album by the Brit group the Pet Shop Boys. The album is actually titled, if you were going to be specific about it, Pet Shop Boys, Actually. That's the actual title of the album, which that sort of thing cracks me up. It was released on September 7th, 1987, through Parlophone Records, which, if memory serves, also released the Blur album we talked about earlier. It is 47 minutes and 52 seconds long. It had 4 singles on there. Kyle, what did you think of the Pet Shop Boys?
So when I saw this album on the list, I didn't know the Pet Shop Boys before this.
Same.
My first thought was, isn't that the people who Let the Dogs Out, and why is that on this list? But fun fact, the Pet Shop Boys and the Baha Men, not the same people. Not the same people.
Unrelated.
Yeah. Getting into this, this is one that I enjoyed at first and then quickly fell off of.
Yeah.
I liked the sound at the beginning. And I think that the title of the album actually, and if you look at the cover of it, I'll put it up on the YouTube version of it, but for the audio version of it, like he's yawning. I think it's just the two guys on the cover, and one of them's yawning, like he's bored with all of this. And it is a very satirical, very ironic album that at first I kind of was like in on it, and I liked the sound, but it just got to be the same thing kind of throughout the entire thing. I like the song Shopping. Like that was kind of early in the album. And that was like, that to me was like the real satirical thing going on. It's a Sin, I think, was probably the most sincere song on the album. And I kind of liked that, the feelings of shame and guilt, but also like annoyance and anger at being looked down on for being sinful, I guess, in their world.
Do you know more about that song?
I don't. I mean, yeah, not really. No.
So I read more about this because just interested to find more context. So at the heart of this album, I'm reading from the description on iTunes because it will do a better job than I can. At the heart of Actually are 3 songs about the HIV/AIDS crisis and the rise of anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric. The pomp of It's a Sin, arguably one of the Pet Shop Boys' most recognizable hits, masks the pain of repressed sexuality and dogmatic bigotry. And then it quotes there. So there's a couple songs that really touch on that. So with those 3 songs in mind, it is, I guess it's not interesting, but it makes a little bit more sense when the Pet Shop Boys are two musicians. One is Christopher Lowe, and the other is David Tennant, who does the vocals. David Tennant has been out for quite a while. Christopher Lowe has never spoken on his sexuality. He just keeps that private. But for those 3 songs in 1987 to be released right after HIV and AIDS really kind of hits the mainstream at that time in history where there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear about the disease in general. So with that laid over it, I think those songs take on a little bit different tenor, and probably connect for a lot of people in a different way than they would for maybe you or I just kind of listening to this casually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, I wasn't assuming anything about necessarily what the song was about without actually having looked into it, but the impression that I got was that it was about sexuality or something along those lines. So it definitely makes sense now thinking back on the song and the authenticity and sincerity of the song. I think that, that certainly makes it a pretty powerful statement.
What'd you score this one?
I ended up at a 2.
Yeah.
I think what this album was, I ended up liking a more modern take on something like a similar genre style to this a little bit later. That we'll get to. I think there was a lot of interesting stuff, like a lot of interesting new ideas going on here that just didn't come together very clearly for me and got repetitive and felt kind of synthetic, that I never really got too far with it. So yeah, 2. What about you?
I would say the same. To me, it's the instrumentation. I just don't really resonate as much with the electro pop, synth pop stuff. I mean, we talked about Sparks earlier, which is somewhat similar. I mean, there's more guitar and piano in that, but like that music was just generally more exciting to me. I don't know. I just didn't resonate with this album. I don't have a whole lot else to say about it. Before we move on, this is an album that did really well, especially in Europe. It got as high as number 25 in the US, but it was number one in Finland, and got into 2 or 3 in the UK, and the singles did really well. It is 4 times platinum, technically 4 times platinum worldwide, but it went platinum in a lot of just a lot of countries in general. I was going to say Europe, but there's a lot around the world: New Zealand, Spain, Sweden, Germany, Finland, Canada, Brazil. Like it sold.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a universal album and widely beloved. Yeah, anything we missed on this one?
No, I don't think so. About covers it.
Right. That about covers it. That was Pet Shop Boys, actually, at 4:35. Yeah, album Crooked Rain by California's Pavement is the 434 greatest band of all time. This was released on Valentine's Day of 1994 through Matador Records. It is 42 minutes and 16 seconds long. It's the second studio album by the aforementioned Stockton, California's own Pavement. This album also had 3 singles on it. What'd you think of this one?
I didn't know Pavement before this. It's one of those that I feel like I've probably heard the name before. I didn't recognize a single song on this album, but this is considered one of the best albums of the 90s. Like this is
Sure.
way up there. Like very top of the top best albums of the 90s. And I get it. I really ended up liking I ended up liking this a lot. I didn't at first. The first song that came on, I was like, oh, it's more like Blur. It's just going to be another one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me pretty quick after that, though. I really ended up enjoying this a lot. It was simple in its songwriting, but very effective. There was a lot of influences that it was pulling on, country, classic rock, kind of jammy stuff at the same time. Like I said, relatively straightforward in its arrangements, but I really enjoyed it. Stop Breathing had this like kind of extended instrumental section that I really liked. 5 - 4 = Unity, which is just an odd name for a song, was a good change of pace. It had, like these jazzy drums, kind of a surfy, dreamy feel to it. I wish I had discovered this when I was like 17. I think I really I enjoy it.
Could have been your whole personality.
Yeah, probably would have. It probably would have. I ended up really enjoying. I think Fillmore Jive was the last song on this album. I'd have to go back because I haven't really been thinking about this too specifically, but I feel like that's probably my favorite, like, album closing song that we've had so far. I really enjoyed that song. But overall, I having not known them coming into this very fresh, and my first initial reaction not being very positive, I ended up really liking this album. I don't know. What about you?
I have 3 takes. 2 of them are going to challenge exactly what you said. One of them is, you said simple. These were simple songwriting songs. 5 - 4 = Unity is a song that is largely in 5/4 time with like a 6/8 bar thrown in there every once in a while just to make it feel like it continues moving forward and not tripping over itself the whole time. And any song in 5/4 is not a simple song.
So let me go back to that real quick then. I feel like it did a good job of feeling straightforward.
Yeah.
It wasn't challenging.
I'm not going to use 2 minutes and 10 seconds of this whole album to tell you you're wrong.
Yeah. It didn't feel challenging to listen to. I guess maybe is
right.
more more what I mean. Not necessarily simple in its songwriting and arrangement, but it wasn't challenging to listen to, but it was interesting.
My other take on this one, do you know the story of the song Range Life?
No.
Range Life, a gentle folk rock tune that famously doubles as a Smashing Pumpkins diss track, which Billy Corrigan stayed mad at for a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So listen to that one again, and we'll see whose side you fall on.
I mean, they can hate each other, and I can still like both.
Benefit from it.
Yeah.
Brand New and Take Back Sunday. I mean, same idea. Yeah. No. And there was a third piece that I had, and now I forgot what it was. The other one was when I listened to this again today. I literally had to go to the internets and say, "Is this the dude from Rancid?" Like the vocals. It's not. And I'm probably doing this guy an unkindness, but the vocals had that. To me, they had that like '90s alt art. Like I'm gonna make this kind of ugly. Like that version of indie, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to make this kind of ugly and kind of dissonant. And if you like it, then you're cool and you're with us. And if not, well, you don't matter anyways. Which for indie music in the 90s, I could see that kind of resonating with a lot of people. Again, that sort of grungy piece. But they were very outspoken in saying that they didn't want to be Nirvana. So they really were trying to make a lane for themselves. What'd you score this one?
I went up to a 4 on this. I enjoyed it.
I would give this one a solid 2. I don't need to hear this one again. I respect it, but I'm good. I'm good. 90s indie didn't do it for me. Anything else you want to talk about with this one?
No, that about covers it, I think, again.
Beautiful. That was Pavement's Crooked Rain at 434. All right, Kyle, the 433rd greatest album. I get that confused every once in a while. Rolling Stone did not claim these are the best album. These are the greatest albums, which we've talked about a little bit before. I'm sorry. Nonetheless, the 433rd definitively greatest album of all time is LCD Soundsystem's Sound of Silver. This album was released on March 12th, 2007 through DFA, Capitol, and EMI Records. This is LCD Soundsystem's second album. I don't know how much you know about LCD Soundsystem.
Nope, not.
But it's generally a band fronted by James Murphy, formed by James Murphy, who co-founded DFA Records, and he's largely the project's leader. He's got a lot of musicians that play along with him, that kind of come in and out, I think, but he's generally the guiding force of this project. This album is close to an hour. It falls under dance punk, electronic rock, electronica, indie rock, dance rock, and art rock. This was the album I mentioned earlier that I had extremely low expectations from, because again, in 2007, this album to me fell under the same umbrella as My Morning Jacket, Bon Iver, Arcade Fire, bands like that were artsy and indie, and I had zero interest in. I wanted loud screaming or more traditionally emo stuff. But as I listened to this, at first, even as I listened to this, I actually hated it. I think I told you, I texted you and said that this album, within the first two songs, I was like, this album feels like I'm trapped in an Abercrombie store, which can be taken different ways. For me, that's a negative, but it felt like I could not escape Abercrombie and Fitch in the maybe 2010s or so. But as I listened to it more, I kind of fell in with some of the grooves in there and the repetition. which I'm interested to hear your takes on. So, what do you think?
Yeah. So you texted me that before I had listened to this. So I was interested to hear what you meant by that. And I think I get what you meant by that as I listened to it. I really liked it though. I really ended up enjoying this. I mean, it was fun. It was funky. It was tight. There was a lot, and I've talked about this a little bit before, like that line between something being complicated versus complex. Like this straddled that line really well. Where there's a lot going on in every single song, you know, especially in the instrumentation. There's a lot of noise.
Out of the 9 songs, how many would you say you enjoyed? Like you really liked?
All 9. This was a no skip album for me.
Then you're oh, perfect. Then this is a good one for you to FMK. Go ahead.
All right. Oh, let me think here.
What song are you taking home from the bar, Kyle?
I think okay. I do have that one. I'm gonna watch the tapes. That song to me felt like a more poppy Nine Inch Nails song. The repetitive riffy beat, the presentation of the lyrics, the way the lyrics are sung, that song felt like a Nine Inch Nails song. That felt like, you know, we listened to Pretty Hate Machine a while ago, and I talked about, you know, how that kind of felt like he was still trying to find, you know, Trent Reznor was still trying to find that balance between like the poppy new wave stuff and the more darker industrial stuff. And later in the career, he just kind of dialed up the darker industrial stuff and dialed down the poppy new wave stuff. This feels like if he had gone in the opposite direction. Still had some of the same sensibilities and the same tastes and interests, but just twisted the dials in opposite directions. And you would have ended up with Watch the Tapes. And I would F that song. I would F with that song. Yep.
You would run a marathon just to drink its bathwater. Good for you.
Yep.
That song also has a nice little Werewolves of London howl in there. That's fun. What song are you taking home to the parental units and getting on one knee for, Kyle? The one that you're going to love forever.
I think for that one, it would have to be the title track, Sound of Silver. That one I didn't... It took a little bit for that to grow on me. You know, talking about teenagers and their emotions and that sort of thing. It didn't quite grab me, but I ended up loving the extended instrumental parts, you know, the musical parts in the middle. And I felt like it was the most complete song on the album. It felt like as a concept, it was the most, complete, I guess. It felt like it just had the most to offer musically. So I would assume that it has the most to offer as a marriage partner.
That one has a lot of Talking Heads vibes to me.
Yeah.
Which, you know, isn't uncommon in some of these songs. And that's probably a large part of some of the programmed nature of some of this. But yeah, what song are you doing away with?
I think I would do away. I would kill the lead track. Was it Get Innocuous? I think it was called. It just didn't feel like quite the right opener for the album. That's hard to choose because I still like that song. Like I said, I don't feel like there are any skips on this album. It was it's interesting because song, but yeah,
I'm literally like listening to them as you're talking about them, and Get Innocuous feels like it's I know it's not true, but it sounds like it was made in a much larger space. Like it feels a little bit emptier than some of the other ones. so sonically, I could see, just based on the ones that I just buzzed through as you're doing this, like I could see why that one feels a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
interesting.
that's where I would go.
I was really hoping. I was really hoping you're going to FMK track 7, 8, and 9 in order, because that would have been perfect. You know, yeah. Watch
Yeah.
the Tapes is 7, Sound of Silver is 8, and then I would say that the one to me that just felt weird was the last track, which is number 9, New York. I love you, but you're bringing me down, which also I listened to in New York City this weekend, which was funny. What did you?
One thing that I thought was interesting with this album is it wasn't necessarily super long. It was close to an hour, right? I think you said. But there are some
Yep.
long songs on this.
Yeah.
And I could see if this isn't your thing, those songs would just be boring and repetitive. But I don't know. For me, they hit in just the right way, almost to the point where I was like, oh, it's, 7-minute song and it's over already. Like, that's a bummer. What, us v them, I really liked that. It was a longer song. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up going with another 4 on this, and a strong 4 at that. Yeah, thinking about that Pavement
I would say
album,
that-
I went 2 4s back to back with Pavement and this. I did like this better than the Pavement album though.
Yeah.
Where'd you go with
I
it?
would say that I started off around maybe a 1 and 1.5, and I got to a 3. That like I could keep this on and it would be fine in given the right setting. But man, I started off, I hated this thing.
Was it at least
Yeah.
nice to know that it isn't Arcade Fire or My Morning Jacket or anything like that? I mean, because it's really
Well, that's kind of the thing. See, I don't. Maybe it's still just a my mind thing. It is made up of different sounds, but it still, to me, is trying to do the same thing. It's trying to fill up a space sonically, with lyrics that to me, like, don't mean a whole lot. I know that I'm missing that. Like, he's writing about things. I get that. But yeah, somewhere, I don't know. It's probably just a mental block. I found, I guess here's how I can best describe it. I think that this album does best for me when I'm not paying attention to it. When I'm doing something else and I don't notice that the same, like, programmed sound has been going on for 5 minutes. Because if I sit with that, I just get bored.
When you're shopping at Abercrombie.
Yes. Yeah.
Or
like when I'm looking out the window and reading something on the phone on the train to New York. Like, I was like, again, that was my experience this weekend, Then I kind of got to a spot where I was like, okay, I could get behind this. But until then, it just like it didn't hold my attention.
See, that's interesting to me, because for me, the more I paid attention to it, the more I got out of it. But I know you said before that you never really cared for Death Cab for Cutie, but did you ever listen to the Postal Service much? Did you like them at all?
I hated them more than Death Cab.
Okay. See, I enjoyed the Postal Service, so this had a little bit of a Postal Service-y feel to me.
I could see that, but to where Death Cab I thought was boring, I was like, so you took members of the band away and played fewer instruments for the Postal Service? Like, no, I'm fully off that train. No thanks.
Postal Service, their one and only album is still top 10 for me, probably.
It's lame.
Top 10 for me.
Oh my God. You settle down. That's sorry, another Shorzy. Settle down. Holy, that's what you were. Yeah, this album, I mean, this LCD Sound System album did very well. It was nominated for Grammys. It sold a bunch of records. I mean, not a ton given the time that it came out, and all that was going on with music sales, but it peaked on the U.S. at number one on the U.S. top dance and electronic albums. It didn't go much further than that. I mean, it got as high as 46 on the U.S. Billboard charts. So that's as high as it peaked on that. But the music critics really loved it. Music fans loved it. Like I said, it was nominated for a bunch of awards. It lost out on, no, it doesn't say that. Oh yeah, there it does. It lost the Grammy Award for Best Electronic Dance Album in 2007, losing to "We Are the Night" by the Chemical Brothers, which I don't know. But it didn't win the Grammy. It would be interesting. Another interesting project would be to go through these albums and the years that the Grammys came out, see if they won Album of the Year, and see which albums won, and see if those albums are on the list somewhere also.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. Because imagine, I mean, I'm sure it's happened. Like that Big Star record was not nominated for any Grammys.
Yeah.
So whatever. It did better on this list than the other 5 or however many were nominated. But anyways, we digress. That was LCD Sound System's album Sound of Silver. 432nd greatest album of all time is Usher's Confessions. This was released on March 23rd of 2004. The original album is 60 minutes and 30 seconds long, but there's a special edition release that comes in at 77 minutes and 22 seconds. Full disclosure, I did not listen to the special edition version. This album has a ton of producers, including but not limited to Jermaine Dupri, Lil Jon, Robin Thicke, Brian Michael Cox, and a few others. I mentioned this is his 4th album. It comes through Arista Records. Kyle, we were both consumers of music when this album came out.
Mm-hmm.
Did you enjoy this album?
No. Just to put it bluntly, no.
That was Usher's Confessions.
So I turned this on without looking into it really at all. Like a lot of times when I go to put an album on, especially if I'm listening to it on my phone, I'll open up the album and I'll just swipe straight to the bottom because the primary thing that I'm looking at when I start an album is how long is it? Is this something, what am I doing in that moment? Do I have time to sit down and listen to this whole thing? Or am I going to have to break it up into chunks and that sort of thing? And I opened it up and I swiped down to the bottom, saw that there are 20 some songs and that it's, however long, over an hour long. It's a long album. I was like, all right, I've got time. Here we go. I'm going to listen to some Usher. And it gets through that intro and then gets right into, like the Lil Jon Ludacris song. And I was like, okay, here we go. Like, I don't love that song. But as soon as I heard that song, I was immediately back in 2004 in some gross club in Binghamton, New York, where the music is so loud that you can't hear yourself speak. And it's like, I was just there again. I was like, all right, I can jam with this for right now. Like I'm in the mood for this sort of thing. And then it just nosedived after that. Like it just,
Agreed.
Just nosedived. I didn't.
I do want to add that saying gross and Binghamton together is redundant, but but yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I mean, it's a banger. It deserves to be. I mean, this could be. Well, there's a couple reasons this is on here. All right. First of all, this album sold in 2004. Right, during LimeWire and Napster, this album sold 1.1 million copies in the first week.
Yeah, it's a big
it broke multiple
selling
sales
album.
records. It was nominated for 8 Grammys and won 3. This album chronicled his breakup with Chili from TLC and was widely regarded as a great song. A great album. But hand up, I'll be the first to admit, this specific genre of male-led R&B is not something that resonates with me. Don't know why. It's just it's not my thing.
But
I don't care.
but I think it can. And I think we saw that with the Maxwell album. We both really liked that
Yes.
Maxwell
Now,
album. That I think is what made this album so disappointing. Is because I realized
I would agree.
I
Yeah.
could like this sort of thing. I didn't like this.
And as a music first guy, like then yes, the arrangements, the instrumentation, the music itself on that Maxwell album, I thought was loads better than this. This is very heavily produced by the names I listed, and it's also a child of its time, right? In that early 2000s R&B / hip hop. Yeah, I don't know. It didn't do it for me.
No.
I would score this one a 2. I mean, I'm gonna score it a 2 for the reasons I mentioned, but I will say that it can be on any hype list.
Yeah.
It needs to be.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. How about you?
Same. I went with a 2. And the more I listened to it, the more I think a lot of it too came down to the production of it. Like, this was very clearly produced for the radio. Like, this was very clearly produced. Like, I mean, there's no dynamic range. Everything is straight down the middle. The you know, they doubled and split the vocals in a lot of these tracks just to make it sound bigger, but otherwise it was boring in almost every sense to me. And I mean, I did see, you know, as far as the sales of this album goes, like it's one of the last albums to sell like over 10 million copies worldwide, which is no joke. Like this album is very well liked, but not by me, not by us.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
But yeah,
All
I
right.
don't know.
That was Usher's Confessions. Yeah, that was Usher's Confessions at 432. The 431st greatest album of all time is How Will the Wolf Survive from Los Lobos. This album was released in October of 1984. It's classified as rock and roll and Tejano music, but includes some rockabilly sounds and some blues in there also. This is the first major label album for Los Lobos. Produced, well, this makes sense after saying all that. Produced by T-Bone Burnett and Steve Berlin. You remember T-Bone Burnett?
I remember the name.
He's a big time blues producer, guitar player. I mean, he's been doing it for a long time. So T-Bone Burnett has done a whole bunch of blues, folk, Americana records, specifically with some soundtracks. He's done that. He worked with June Carter Cash and Johnny Cash. So hold on. No, I'm sorry. He worked with the actors Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon for Walk the Line. So he's had his hands in Americana blues music for quite a long time. He's contributed quite a bit to that stuff. So anyways, you know, it's coming from that sound. What did you think of this album, Kyle?
This was up my alley. I enjoyed it a whole lot more than I thought I was going to. This is, you know, another one that I hadn't heard before. I appreciated the wide variety of influences that it drew on. And not even influences. I mean, from song to song, some of these songs are very different from each other. And sometimes to me that can be jarring and make it feel like there's a lack of cohesiveness. But I think, you know, that the great guitar playing kind of strings all of it together, whether it was, you know, like Don't Worry Baby is like kind of a rock and blues, like almost a ZZ Top kind of song. And then Corrido #1, which is more of a Hispanic, a Mexican, almost polka-ish, like a oompa kind of feel with the accordion and all that. That guitar playing strung through all of it, I feel like kind of tied it all together and kept it feeling relatively cohesive. It was not something that like was jaw-droppingly phenomenal, but I enjoyed listening to it. Like, I would probably go back to this at some point and listen to it again. I enjoyed listening to it. Yeah, it was interesting, at least. Yeah, interesting, I guess, would be the best way to put it. What do you think?
I give this one a 2. I mean, I heard the rockabilly blues stuff, and it's kind of fun in that it puts you. Here's what it reminded me of. Here's what it kind of mood it put me in. It put me in the mood of I was flicking through channels, watching Food Network, and there was a barbecue style man versus food kind of show on. Like, that's what it reminded me of, and maybe that's my own issue, right? Like, I'm not expanding my take on it at all, but I don't know. I thought it was a little all over the place. I respect the musicians because they do what they do really well. But I guess the rockabilly stuff isn't really for me either.
Yeah.
So there's been a I guess, now that we're at the end of our 10 albums for this week, I guess if I was going to unify a lot of this, there's just a lot in this 10 album group that just isn't for me, and I couldn't find a whole lot to gravitate or hang on to. Even the Gorillaz album that I liked, like, that's not something that I typically like. Mm-hmm. One of the things I read, I was reading about this album, the Los Lobos record, is that, there's other people that have reviewed these records, and one person who did so said, yeah, this song was all right, and this song was okay, and but ultimately this album was not one of my favorites on this list, but hey, they can't all be. And that's kind of how I feel about it too. Like,
yeah, which is, I mean, this, and just like that Pavement album, this was listed as, is considered one of the top albums of the 80s too.
I mean, it's different from the stuff we've heard before, not only on this list, but in our lives, you know? Like this ain't Madonna, and it's not Guns N' Roses, and it's not Michael Jackson, or the Bangles even, like, I mean, it's not those guys, so it is different.
Yeah.
It is remarkable in that it is able to be remarked upon. Yeah. So yeah, what did you score this one? Did I miss that part?
No. Strong 3. Didn't quite get to a 4 for me, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. No reason to beat a dead wolf. How Will the World Survive from Los Lobos is at 431. So now that we've gotten through our 10 albums, Kyle, we return to the segment we end every episode with, which is the I've Got One Better, where we review these 10 albums and come up with one album that we really like that we think should replace one. Typically, we try to come up with one that is somewhat related to some of the albums we thought of, or we listened to on here. Kyle, did you have one better for this week?
Sort of. I sometimes I take this in a different direction where it's more of like, if you liked this, give this a try.
Good. I like it.
I wouldn't necessarily say that this album is better. I would say that I highly bet that most people have never heard of this album because these guys have, like, last time I looked on YouTube Music, they had like 12 followers on YouTube Music. But one of my favorite funk adjacent bands, if you liked the James Brown album, or you want something that's maybe a little bit more contemporary and draws on that funk energy of the James Brown album, check out the album Banuba's Travels by the band Banuba. You might be familiar with them. You might be familiar with them a little bit.
So I've never listened to them, but I know how big of a Banuba fan you are.
I love Banuba. I love Banuba, and I That's what I was thinking about the whole time. And they are, like I said, with James Brown, in that kind of funk genre. It's not unusual for a band to be a live band, to have their live performances really be what encapsulates them as a band, where their talent really lies, and working with the crowd and getting people excited and having fun and dancing. And then the studio stuff is kind of like, yeah. I mean, it's good, but it doesn't really capture who they are as a band. And that's very true for Banuba. I really enjoy the album, Banuba's Travels. But them live is just such a great show. I don't even know if they're still around anymore. They used to come around here quite often. They're from New York City, but they would travel up here to play, a couple times a year that we would go see them. I don't know that they're even around anymore, but if they are around and you're in the New York City area, they're worth checking out. This album is definitely worth checking out.
I was thinking about the album Park Life from Blur, and specifically the title track Park Life. It has this spoken word sort of piece to it, and being the Brits that they are, the voice sounds oddly specific, and then in my memories I was like, this sounds really familiar, and there's a band called The Outline that I saw open up a long time ago for Seosin. And it was one of the few shows. They opened up for maybe Seosin or Circus Survive, I don't remember. But it was one of the few shows where I fell in love with the openers. Like, they won me over. The Outline was first, and I really got into their album. Envy on the Coast was second, and I loved Envy on the Coast. And then, Seosin is who they are. But anyways, this album from The Outline, entitled You Smash It, We'll Build Around It. It was released in 2006, and it contains a wide variety of songs. There's some... I think it is a pretty good compliment to Blur in that there's some electronic parts, there's some loud parts, there's some quiet, almost ballady type parts. But the song specifically I was drawn to that compares to Park Life is the song Broadway and Hearst, which tells the story of this weird the guy murders the guy that hooked up with his girlfriend. And in hearing the Blur song now, I can't help but think that they did it on purpose, because the character has a faux British accent and sounds very much like the narrator in Park Life. So that brought me back to that album a little bit. And it's got great songs. Shotgun's a good one. It's got a song called Sloppy Drunk that's just a rager. And the album starts off so strong with two songs, Aesthetics and Life or Life that are electronically driven, kind of like LCD Sound System, but actually culminate in something that's like a payoff, I found, bigger than LCD Sound System does. So yeah, I really liked that album from The Outline, You Smash It, We Build Around It.
Cool.
That's my pick.
Good stuff.
Great. So Kyle, you and I were talking, we can kind of commit this to the media right now. I think we're going to change our format a little bit moving forward. Mm-hmm. Maybe this won't impact anybody, our 3 listeners. I think we're going to move to maybe 5 albums that we talk about, because our lives are at a point where it's hard to really get into these 10 albums and give them the really fair shots that we want to. Because in full transparency, there was a couple albums this week where I glossed over them and didn't have a lot of takeaways. So given that, we're going to go from albums 430 to 426 next week, I think. And we'll see how that goes. There's another interesting mix of albums.
They don't look like a whole lot of fun.
I will tease you, though. There is a guaranteed 5 from me amongst these 5 albums. And that's all I'm going to tell you.
Well,
There is a
okay. I
guaranteed five.
I bet I can tell.
There is a guaranteed 5 on the back of one song alone. I don't even know what the other songs are on that album, but spoiler alert, it closed my wedding reception. So yeah, I can't wait to talk about that one because that one's gonna be fun.
Husker
It
Du?
it is one of my top 3 songs. Yeah, Husker Du for sure. No, it is one of my top three songs in my life. And I just shared it with my daughter last week, and she loves it. I'll tell you all about it next time. So great. Anything else?
No, I think we've covered it. We'll be back again next
That's
week.
it for this week. Nailed it. In this episode, we count down albums 440 through 431 on the Rolling Stone Greatest Albums of All Time. Tyler is left whelmed, if not entirely underwhelmed, with all but one entry, while Kyle, on the other hand, came away with a few winners. But we both agreed that once again, double albums are presumptuous and unnecessary when they're left in unskilled hands. I'm Tyler, and this is Kyle. Let's get to it.